Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar. So today we're going to walk you through 3 of our must-know trends from our annual Catching the Dots report, giving you a full picture of how consumers' attitudes and behaviours will shape the year ahead. These trends will be focused on how the pandemic changed consumers' approach to life, how consumers are taking more control over their well-being, and how consumers are sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly on social media. Before we dive in, allow us to quickly introduce ourselves. So my name is Katie and I'm Trends Manager on the Trends team. And I'm also joined by my colleague Shauna Moran, who's a Trends Analyst here at GWI as well.
Hey everyone, great to be here.
And we'll also be joined by the wonderful Heath, who's Director of Market Engagement for the B2B Institute at LinkedIn. And she'll be walking us through her own take on some of these trends and sharing some of LinkedIn's own research as well.
Thanks, Katie. So before we dive into the data, we're just going to give you a quick overview of who we are for anyone who might not know us. GWI is a target audience company, and we provide consumer insights to leading brands, marketing agencies, and media organizations worldwide. We've got the world's biggest panel of respondents with over 22 million panelists in 47 countries, representing over 2 billion internet users. We make this data available through our intuitive subscription-based platform, which allows teams to dive in and cross-analyze different data points and audiences. This helps them better understand consumers' behaviors, attitudes, social media habits, their purchase journey, and so much more. This webinar uses a mixture of data from GWI Core, which is our main flagship survey, GWI USA, which offers a deep dive into the habits and attitudes of over 240 million American internet users across all 50 states, GWI Work, our B2B dataset, which profiles business professionals in 17 markets, and finally, GWI Zeitgeist, which is fielded monthly and gives us the flexibility to ask questions about the things that matter right now.
Nice, thanks, Shauna. So first up, we've got a trend that's all about how the pandemic prompted consumers to really reflect on and reassess their priorities and ultimately figure out what makes them happy. Before the pandemic, I think many of us would oftentimes be lost in our busy and very hectic day-to-day lives, moving from one thing to the next, juggling work, maybe parenthood, studies, and everything else in between. But I think COVID has caused people to really take a step back and reflect on their lives and how they spend their time, and also question if what they're doing actually brings them joy. Cliche or not, the pandemic made it crystal clear that time is precious and we need to make the most of it in whatever way that we can. This obviously impacts both brands and employers quite a lot, and it's something that we'll touch on more in a little bit as well.
So before we get to that, we're going to look at things on a more personal level. The pandemic inspired some to be more active in pursuing their individual talents, as many started thinking, if not now, when? And this train of thought crops up in our research. In the US, internet users are feeling bolder, more adventurous, and empowered, while at the same time, they see less of a need to be careful, which has been helped by people generally feeling more optimistic about their finances. It almost feels like after 2 years of restrictions and uncertainty, consumers are working to take back the reins over their lives.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a YOLO or you only live once mentality shine through in our Zeitgeist research, which was carried out across 7 markets last September. And here we can see that treating oneself and indulging has become more important to consumers over the past year and is one of the top priorities for many people. And in some markets like France and Italy, this treat yourself mentality actually takes the top spot. And obviously this might look different to many people. So for some, it might mean pursuing new experiences, focusing on passion projects or hobbies, maybe splurging out on a product that you've had your heart set on for a while, or maybe it means even reevaluating your satisfaction with your current role.
Yeah, that's right. And for brands and marketers, aligning their messaging and tone with this popular outlook and doubling down on consumers' desire to make up for lost time will really help them stand out. This obviously applies across so many different industries, but a great example is travel. Looking at our more recent December research around New Year's resolutions, Traveling more has actually seen the biggest increase among resolution makers in the US and UK since last year. Research from ABTA found that the catch-up consumer is a key travel trend for the year ahead. This is where people make up for the trips and experiences they've missed out on. For travel brands, now's the time to make the most out of consumers' rising financial confidence, need for adventure, and desire to splurge. The pandemic has been mentally exhausting for all of us at times, and we shouldn't underestimate the benefits holidays can have on our overall well-being.
Yeah, for sure. And this newly embraced YOLO mentality is also coming to the surface in the workplace as well. So throughout the pandemic, we've all likely seen headlines of the Great Resignation making the rounds, where essentially workers felt increasingly empowered to move to another role. And using our GWY work research across 17 markets, 32% of professionals say they're likely to search for a new job in the next 6 months, a figure that's largely driven by younger age groups. So security, stability, and progression might have encouraged people to stay on board before COVID, but employee expectations are changing really, really fast. And employers' stance and action they take on things like mental well-being and working arrangements count for so much nowadays. And it's something that more job hunters are looking for before they sign the dotted line.
Right, and there are reasons why we expect so much more from employers right now. Burnout's a big one and something many workers are all too familiar with. The number of people who work late has gone up over the course of the pandemic, and job seekers are even more likely than the average professional to work longer hours and have more meetings. And while working from home has tons of benefits, it also has some drawbacks. Some of us have found it harder to switch off, and more have started feeling detached from their team or company's vision. This has made work life seem a little more empty or aimless to some professionals, which is why job seekers are 36% more likely than average to want to do meaningful work, and 31% more likely to want to do work that makes them happier. As workers increasingly feel powered to look elsewhere, it's important for employers to take into account not only how their company wants to work going forward, but also just checking in regularly and celebrating the impact their employees are having.
Nice one, Shauna. Yeah, so guys, we're going to leave you here with 3 key takeaways. So as consumers increasingly seek to make up for lost time and treat themselves, increased spending could be on the horizon, opening up plenty of opportunities across a range of industries. For any brand looking to connect with consumers, it is essential to tap into this YOLO mentality in their messaging. And finally, employees want more from their jobs. So what used to work in the past won't necessarily work anymore today. And it's something that employers need to bear in mind as they move forward.
Nice one, Casey. So switching gears a bit, we're now going to walk through how the pandemic brought the conversation of well-being to the forefront and encourage more consumers to sit in the driving seat where their health's concerned. In the past, most people would just kind of see a doctor when they got sick rather than proactively think about ways to prevent illness from the get-go. And I think this wait and see mentality is definitely changing, and for the better.
For sure. From our data, we know that a considerable portion of consumers are more mindful of taking care of both their physical and mental well-being than before. And with so much of our lives over the past 2 years revolving around maintaining healthy habits like hand washing and staying safe, it's really no wonder why many people are thinking differently about their health. You've seen how quickly things can change, and it's made a lot of us think about our wellness on a much deeper level than before, or perhaps even in new ways as well. I know for myself personally, it's definitely made me more aware of things like sickness etiquette, among many, many other things.
Yeah, it's mad to think a lot of us used to come into work with a cold pre-COVID, whereas today we tend to be a lot more mindful about these things. When we first wrote this report, Omicron wasn't on anyone's radar, which really puts into perspective how fast things can change. And let's be honest, none of us thought we'd still be dealing with COVID almost 2 years down the line. Unsurprisingly, the impact of the pandemic and all the uncertainty that comes with it has massively impacted our well-being. More in the US are experiencing issues like back or muscle pain, and there's been a clear rise in stress and anxiety levels. This all hints at the more long-term impact COVID will have on difficult to manage conditions and situations, and explains why people are more on the ball about taking care of themselves and those around them.
Exactly. And there's still so many unknowns as well, especially when it comes to the impact of long COVID too, where there's still so much research to be done around this growing issue. And before the pandemic even hit, the mental health crisis was already such a huge problem. And based on our Zeitgeist research from September, we can see that some groups have been feeling the strain more than others. So we can see differences across a number of groups. On an age level, younger consumers report much higher levels of worsening mental well-being than their older counterparts. So things like disruptions to education, life experiences, and uncertain job prospects have all weighed much more heavily on this young group. At the same time, women are disproportionately affected as well. This might be down to a mix of factors, such as balancing work and family responsibilities. I actually recently read that in 2021, more people around the world Googled how to maintain mental health than ever before. Queries nearly surged 70% between April and May, according to Google. I think this really shows the scale of the issue we're facing. And as many countries continue to grapple with COVID and the different variants, the focus will be on making sure people get the support that they need.
Definitely. And the workplace is central to this trend as well. We saw a whole host of companies upgrading their mental health support during the pandemic, including offering on-demand advice. But 2021 research by Deloitte actually showed that only 38% of millennials and 35% of Gen Zs have spoken openly with their supervisors about stress. There were many reasons for this, like feeling ashamed or scared that this revelation might hurt their reputation. This just all shows that we need to work together and do more to destigmatize mental health, especially managers who should focus on empowering their team to ask for help or use company resources. This will benefit both employers and businesses because an emotionally supportive workplace just takes fewer sick days and is generally more productive. So investing in mental health is really a no-brainer.
Yeah, and people are definitely doing more than just not coming into work or taking time off when they have symptoms or feel sick. So for younger people in particular, setting boundaries and saying no has emerged as one of their key well-being strategies. So more young people are taking breaks from work, they're spending less time on social media, and they're saying no to unwelcome social activities, all in the bid to manage their mental health. And we've traditionally lived in a yes culture, so where people say yes to tasks at work or other responsibilities, even when they might already be very overloaded. It's definitely something I've been guilty of in the past, but there's huge power in saying no for self-care. You're not lazy if you say no, you're simply recognizing your limits and taking steps to put yourself first. And that's completely okay. And I think it's definitely something that employers need to encourage more, and we need to have an active conversation around.
Right, employer actions are super important, but we can't cover well-being without at least touching on the importance of technology. It's a topic I know I could talk a lot about, but I think this chart says it best. It's a shining example of how tech is allowing people to take more ownership of their health. In the US, consulting a doctor when feeling sick has risen by 35% since Q2 2020, with the biggest jumps coming from older generations who are more at risk. We only need to look at the massive lineup for this year's CES event to get a sense of how enthusiastic the business world is about digital health innovation. And we can't wait to see this trend develop.
Yeah, I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that space. It's really exciting. So again, guys, we're going to leave you with a few key takeaways here. So firstly, more people need support. And with this increased demand for help comes pressure on health services. But it also gives brands the opportunity to create and provide products and services that are focused on well-being and self-care. People are more conscious about staying well, so they'll likely lean more towards brands that help empower them to do this. Next, more younger people are speaking up for themselves and they're setting limits. Saying no and recognizing boundaries is something that should be actively encouraged at work as a way to manage our headspace. And finally, tech is helping to empower people to take control of their own well-being to the point where they're not treated just as a patient, but more as a customer. And this on-demand model of healthcare is something that's really going to change the game as we move forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So just as our attitudes towards managing physical and mental well-being has changed over the last couple of years, so has the way we see and use social media, which is what we'll be talking about in this section. As I'm sure some of you know, influencers got a pretty bad rep during the pandemic. Many felt it was irresponsible for them to get around travel bans by saying their work abroad was essential. And especially with so many workers being laid off or isolating at home, pictures of tan bodies posing in Bali and the usual displays of wealth just weren't relatable to a lot of people. Unfortunately, some social media stars failed to read the room and their posts rubbed many the wrong way. With all this going on, the stronger push we've seen towards less artificiality makes sense, and it's something brands and their ambassadors should keep in mind when planning out new content. These days, being too perfect on social media is something that can actually work against you. Clean, polished content is everywhere, and the whole point of marketing is to stand out.
And it's not that people are done with influencers by any means. And actually, we've seen a recent rise in the number saying that they follow them. Various audiences want their online social environment to be more open and pressure-free. And a lot of this comes down to what shows up on our news feeds. So as we can see here, Gen Z are the most opinionated about the effects of social media and eager to bring more wellness to this space. This group stands out for saying that there's too much pressure to be perfect online. And our USA research shows the number wanting their lifestyle to impress others is dropping over time. So the desire to show off seems to have taken a backseat for many in this group. Instead, they're showing admiration for those brave enough to peel back the shiny layers and share the bad as well as the good, because this normalizes our moods. It helps us make peace with our so-called imperfections. To put simply, it's something that's a lot more relatable to many of us. And a really good example of this comes from Simone Biles, who gained millions of followers after dropping out of the 2020 Olympics to protect her mental health.
So yeah, we're going to discuss filters now. And in the past, I'm sure many of us have either seen someone use the hashtag no filter or take part in some kind of no makeup selfie campaign. Clearly, this movement isn't anything new. But with mental health being so important and consumers thinking more holistically about their health, it's picked up and it's influencing social media behaviors and attitudes. Around 1 in 5 social media users agree they're less interested in using filters than they used to be. And since 2020, Europe and North America have seen a drop in Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok users applying these filters. But they're not just policing themselves more, they're also holding brands and influencers accountable.
Yeah, our research definitely shows demand for more filterless material. So a fifth say they most want to see content that doesn't use filters from the people or organizations they follow, which means unedited images often have more drawing power than edited ones. Plus, those who follow beauty experts are even more adamant that influencers make it clear when they use filters. So the industry's biggest fans are the least flexible about this kind of thing.
Sure, and new regulation is just reaffirming their beliefs and ensuring that even more groups are on the lookout. Just a couple of weeks back, the UK government introduced a bill that would require influencers to display warning logos on pictures where body shapes have been altered. I mean, this isn't going to solve everything, but laws like these are spreading the word that something definitely needs to change and reminding consumers that those putting professional content out there have a duty to them. Brands can keep aspirational content fans happy and build loyalty among them by simply doing more quality control checks. A growing number work in long-term partnerships with influencers, which means they're very closely linked to the work that their ambassadors create. So building a strong set of guidelines and making sure they implement them is best practice.
Yeah, for sure. And aside from that, there are already layouts and examples in place that brands can draw on. Now, in the last 18 months, photo jumps have become popular on social media. So for those of you who haven't seen them, they're where a social networker chucks a series of random photos or memes together in a post. They might not look pretty, but that's kind of the point. So we mentioned that younger consumers want to make their relationship with social media a healthier one. And many are leaning on laughter and spontaneity to do this. It might have been a popular quality beforehand, but 46% say humor has become more important to them since the pandemic, possibly because funny memes help people cope more with stress during lockdowns. There's definitely still demand for inspirational images that look good. And change rarely happens overnight, but many want to see more laid back interactions alongside the usual picture perfect posts to ensure social media adds something good to their life. And great things will come to brands that really take the opportunity to mix things up a little bit more and to make themselves part of the solution.
Great. So again, to sum up in 3 points. Firstly, we've seen a shift away from perfection and too much pre-planning in the networking space, and a step toward light-hearted material. Next up, fewer social media users are applying filters. Many want to see more of people's true selves online and favor professional posts that blend into this atmosphere they're working so hard to create, which is more honest, inclusive, and carefree. And on the whole, they prefer unedited profiles to overly curated ones. Thankfully, casual layouts and posts offer an easy way for both brands and influencers to really lay things bare.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shauna. Right, guys, that's our part wrapped up. I'm absolutely delighted to now hand this over to Heath from LinkedIn, who's going to give her own take on everything.
My name is Heath. I'm director at LinkedIn's B2B Institute think tank, where we investigate how to create more value in marketing. I'm here to share some insights on the Connecting the Dots research by adding insights from LinkedIn's work on the Great Reshuffle. We've all seen signs in front of restaurants, shops, and factories that say we're hiring, help wanted. And now the Omicron variant is taking a toll on an already depleted workforce. So we're wondering, how can there be so many jobs when nearly every employer seems to be offering better pay, benefits, and signing bonuses? Well, we're calling it the Great Reshuffle. It's a time when everyone is rethinking everything. LinkedIn's economic graph gives us a unique view into insights on this. So let's talk about it along with some other connected trends. What we're seeing now as the economy recovers and job openings become more available is that people are in a very different place and are quitting in record numbers. In the United States, well over 20 million people quit their jobs in the second half of 2021. Some are calling it the Big Quit. You may have also heard it referred to online as the Great Resignation. People have been living to work for a long time, and I think the pandemic brought a moment of clarity for all of us. We are saying, what do we want to do? What makes our hearts sing? We're also asking ourselves the question, if not now, then when? So although the talent market ebbs and flows, many of the changes we're seeing today are unlikely to be undone. But our data on who's leaving jobs is also really compelling. Millions of baby boomers are retiring early, but also millions of Gen Z workers, people in their teens and early 20s, many more women than men, in all the highest quit rate since the government started keeping track 2 decades ago. We can also see what sectors people are quitting, retail and hospitality, and in some cases people are quitting and not returning. It's kind of a take this job and shove it measure. It's a sign of people saying, you know what, I don't need this. So we have a unique view of the data. We can see across millions of members on the LinkedIn platform what they share with us. We can see from employers, millions of them that are posting jobs on the platform. There's one person hired every 15 seconds right now on LinkedIn. So with everyone looking for talent at the same time, you can expect a more competitive environment. The most recent data shows that 4.4% of positions in education are open, over 6% in retail, and more than 8% in healthcare. Jobs in restaurants and hotels are nearly 9%. That's almost 1.5 million vacant positions. LinkedIn data since the start of the pandemic has shown that candidates' priorities are shifting too. A lot of people are opting, just because of affordable housing costs, to move to more affordable places, smaller cities that give you more space. Also, I want to demystify, many people believe that generous government benefits and unemployment benefits are really what's keeping so many workers on the sidelines. What we saw, however, that when these benefits were turned off, when workers were no longer getting the benefits, they didn't rush back to work. What that tells us is that it's not just a function of the benefits. That's not the only thing going on in the heads of workers when they make that calculus of, should I go back? Will I go back? And for what job? So the social contract of work is being rewritten, and right now it's workers that are holding the pen. And companies have to be mindful about the needs of employees when thinking things through. Workers want better pay and benefits, but we're also demanding autonomy and flexibility, and particularly in our work schedules. As Karen Kimbrough, our chief economist, says, candidates are being much more selective about where they work and more vocal about what they want. The top 3 priorities that mattered most to candidates in 2021 were work-life balance, good compensation and benefits, and colleagues and culture that inspire employees to do their best. The single biggest change in priorities was the rapidly growing importance of flexible work arrangements. Also, an inclusive workplace for people of diverse backgrounds grew more important, rising sharply after the murder of George Floyd and resulting international Black Lives Matter protest movement. Work-life balance was already the overall number 1 priority for candidates at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's only grown more important. While candidate preferences have shifted, many companies today aren't delivering what talent wants. While work-life balance and compensation and benefits are 2 of the most important priorities for candidates, our global Glint employee survey data reveals that companies score poorly on those priorities relative to other factors measured. There's been an increase of 48% of people wanting to work with companies that better align with their values, and a 44% increase in respondents looking for opportunities to move up. For all the benefits of remote work, there's also a downside. Employees are more likely to struggle with work-life balance. According to global Glint data, employee burnout signals have spiked by 9% in recent months, and employee happiness fell by 3% in 2021. Working mothers were and still are among those hardest hit as the pandemic robbed them of many childcare options. And predominantly, the women we're missing are the parents of young children. They were hit the hardest for sure. What we're seeing now is actually a story of resilience, because we're seeing more and more women come back into the workforce. So we need to have cultural changes that follow policy changes so employees don't feel burned out from a never-ending digital workday. When flexibility isn't an option, perhaps for in-person service jobs, employers should consider increasing compensation as a lever to bring in more talent. As people collectively try to figure out how this is going to work, it presents us with a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reimagine how we work. Flexible working arrangements are now one of the top 5 priorities for job candidates. 75% of job seekers are looking for hybrid work opportunities. This means we can recruit from more places. Recruiters can access talent pools in new markets if they're open to those remote roles, as well as from broader metropolitan areas where commuting is less prohibitive in a hybrid model. More options can make companies more diverse and inclusive. So the rise of remote work can make companies more attractive to systemically excluded groups. The path forward requires conversation. While we've turned the page on a new year, the challenges, conversations, and actions needed to create a more equitable workplace are still with us. At LinkedIn, we launched Conversations for Change, a new series about critical topics that have been kept out of professional settings for too long. Assimilation is exhausting. It leaves no time for creativity or innovation. People want to work in spaces where they can show up authentically and where their authenticity is an asset. We're looking for ourselves, and we want to see ourselves represented and reflected in our customers. If not addressed, your best and brightest will leave and find somewhere that values their authenticity, where their authenticity is an asset. So what can we do? Well, managers make the difference. Where does the majority of day-to-day support come from? Well, 85% of people say it comes from their manager. Compared to senior leaders, individual contributors are nearly 2 times more likely to report a lack of manager support for their well-being. Employees who feel cared for are 3.2 times more likely to be happy and 3.7 times more likely to recommend working at the company. Businesses will also need radical flexibility to retain and attract talent. We're seeing mixed messages here, though, and something of a paradox. On one hand, people prefer enjoying the benefits of working remotely. On the other hand, they want the inspiration and proximity of in-person working. So this means there'll be less time in the office, which means we have to also work harder to create a strong culture and sense of unity. Even before the pandemic, we saw that 81% of respondents said they say the question of whether they can trust a brand to do the right thing is a deal breaker. So branding is more important than ever, not just in attracting talent, but retaining, empowering, and inspiring employees around your company mission and culture. So branding will play a crucial role in attracting talent as well as retaining a more virtual and dispersed workforce. We can see how this unified brand approach plays a role for companies. We need to take care of all of our stakeholders, business to buy into solutions, investors it needs to invest, and also to get that high quality talent in the door to drive the strategy. So there you have it. Thanks for investing your time with us today. I really do believe this is an opportunity to reimagine things, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some insights with you. Again, my name is Heath. Please do feel free to connect with me and learn more about these insights by searching for The Great Reshuffle and LinkedIn's economic graph, and also Glint global survey data. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for everybody joining today, and especially to Ty as well, who's come along to share some really interesting findings. Thanks so much for your time. And that's the end, guys. So thanks so much for tuning in. So we've only covered 3 trends from the report here today, but there's plenty more trends to go through in your own time. I've popped the link on screen, which will take you to all the trends available on the website. And obviously, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our team email is also available on screen now. And thanks so much, guys.